Hello, this is Brad or Brad Wild. We're going to take a flight today in a general aviation aircraft. This is the Bonanza 733 from Coronado. Normally, I'm flying jets, right? Anyone who follows me knows that I favor the JAR A320 or the new X737, even the 340A Saab from X Aviation. But today we're going to fly from an airport just northeast of Boston called Beverly up to an airport a little bit to the northwest called Lebanon. And I'm going to be flying VOR or radio navigation, and this harkens back to my early days as a private pilot in training when we only had VORs. It was even before RNAV was around. So I just thought it would be an interesting exercise, something a little bit different. So let me know what you think. I've set the time for about 5 o'clock in the evening or late afternoon, and let me just show you what I've set for weather. So it's non-precision IFR. I don't know if we'll get any precipitation or not, and we do have overcast at about 4,000 feet. And we will climb up to about 10,000 if we have time. So let's do some planning before we go out to the airplane. And I'm going to be starting here from Beverly. Let me zoom out a little bit. You can see Beverly down here just northeast of Boston, and Lebanon up here. So if we fly VOR on a sectional map like this, we can simply choose the VORs that are most directly in line with our flight path. So this is an obvious one, and we would pick this up soon after takeoff. So I'm going to just add that. And I'm just looking at the weather. We have winds out of 170. So we'll probably be taking off on this runway. I'm not sure what it is. Let's take a look at the airport diagram. It's runway 16, and I believe we're parked over here. So we have a bit of taxiing to do. And while I'm here, I'm just checking my altimeter, and it is 3025. So we'll take off, we'll swing around here, and we'll pick up our VOR. There's another VOR right here, but it's a little close. I don't think it's necessary. If you don't know, VORs are line of sight. So the higher you are, the greater your altitude, the further out you can pick up the signal from the VOR. So I'm going to add the Concord VOR here. So it's 36 miles. We should have no problem picking up a signal. So we could fly outbound on this 339 radial and inbound on the, what are they calling it here, about the 160 bearing. So as you fly inbound, it's a bearing. As you fly outbound, it's a radial, but generally people just say radial. Then we have a little bit of a highway here. We do have an airway, V141, and we are going to fly over this VOR, and I'll show you why. It's the Lebanon VOR. Pulling up the maps, we'll see what approaches are available to us, and because of the winds, we'll be shooting an approach, the ILS approach, to runway 18. So let's take a look at that plate, and you can see here we are going to be flying over this VOR and then flying to the outer marker. But we will not be using RNAV or GPS or anything. We're going to just take this outbound radial, the 318, until we cross or intercept the localizer, and we will back course in this direction, then do our procedure turn, come back, pick up the localizer, and shoot our ILS approach. So I'm not sure how you'd want to chart that. So it'd probably be kind of in this direction that we'd be picking that up. I'm not sure where 318 is. Probably about like this. And then flying outbound, do a procedure turn, and come back. So that will be our approach into Lebanon. So I think we are ready. You can check out what Flight Vector has charted for us, but no reason to export it or anything. We're just going to be not hand flying it, but simply using VOR or radio navigation. I'm using the realism package from Sim Coders, which you can purchase on the xplane.org store. It's about 20 bucks. And it adds some realism, especially in terms of sounds and the way the airplane flies. All this other stuff is kind of eye candy. But let's just do our pre-flight check, do a walk around. You can see this little icon here. So they request that we turn on our master switch, and then we can walk around the airplane. You can see the little guide that they give you, and they just have you check doors, and you can check the elevator, which is always a good thing, and check the rudder, and then you can remove the tie down, checking air intake, flap, check the aileron. You're just making sure that there's nothing obstructing those surfaces. No birds have built a nest. They even show you your air pressure. And we'll remove all this. Remove the chocks. And we'll just check the aileron. Flap. And now we're ready to climb into the airplane. Okay, so I've got my checklist pulled up here. We've already turned on our battery, flip on our alternator and our beacon, let folks know we're home. On to the next page. I turn on my master avionics because for some reason in the Coronado it powers the fuel flow gauge, which I'm going to need for this first action item. Sorry. So mixture needs to be rich, full throttle, and I'm going to flip on my auxiliary fuel switch until this peaks. If I wait too long, it'll flood the engine and I'll have problems. Turn off that power. Yell clear. Pull my throttle back to about a 1/4 inch in, and we're ready to start the engine. There we go. And our RPM can come back a little bit, 1200. And now we can power up some of the other items here. Wait to flip on my strobe and landing light till we are a little bit closer to taking off. Get our avionics going. Yaw damper. And we'll go ahead and call the tower, ground control, and taxi to our runway. One other thing before we taxi, we want to get some lights on here. Let's see, they have nice post lighting here. Starting to get dark outside, so just wanted to make sure we can see what we're doing, and we can head on over to the runway now. So where is the runway? Let's check our local map. Zoom in here. So we're going to be taking off on runway 16, so we need to taxi all the way over here. So I'm going to turn around, or at least head to the right, and hopefully there are going to be some taxiways that I can follow. Release our brake. And I won't bore you with this once we get to the end of the runway. So here we are at the end of runway 16. By the way, I meant to mention the scenery for this airport, and the one that we are flying to is by Daryl Solomon. It's a free download on xplane.org, and the scenery downloads. Just want to give credit where credit is due. So back into the airplane, and we're just going to do a run up. So I will take this, let me show you where that is. So we run it up to 1700 RPM, and we just want to make sure that we don't get significant drops when we use each one of our magnetos independently. So we'll go ahead and run this up a little bit. 1700. There we go. That's right. Back to both. Down to left. Back to both. By the way, that's a very sensitive switch. You can get yourself in trouble. Back to about 1200. So one more thing to do before we take off. Remember, this flight is about radio navigation, so we need to tune our radios accordingly. We need to tune to the first VOR. We check our map, and it is Lawrence at 112.5, and notice the Morse code: short, long, too short, short, too long, and too long. So we'll identify that once we get it tuned in. So 5 and 12 is already set. We'll put that in the active position, and then we want to check we want to center our needle here just so that we know where we are in relationship to it. So this is called the CDI, and we've centered the needle, so we are pointing at the VOR now. And like I said, we want to be able to listen to it. So we've been cleared for takeoff. Release our brake. Thing I never did was check our barrow here. It's 30.05. Alright, shouldn't be doing that while I'm taxiing into position. Alright, full power. I'm getting a mixture warning, but I'm not sure why. Gear up. Then we can reduce our RPM now. It's a constant speed prop. Trim the airplane a little bit. So the VOR is directly behind us, so we would just probably follow the directions from the tower on which way to turn. I'll just go ahead and turn to the left, and we want to pick up that VOR. So you can see that the bearing is just a little bit to the left of us. So with permission from the tower, we'll fly close to the airport to try to pick that up. And we'll wait for that needle to center, or we can just go ahead and center it now. And then we know what direction to fly in. Just head in that direction. And just continue our rate of climb. So one of the questions is, how far are we from that VOR? Well, we're only 11 miles. So the next question is, let me switch over to our map. Might as well use our autopilot. Just to hold us there. Our altitude, let's dial in 9,000. Go ahead and arm that. So 10 miles out. So what's next? Well, our next VOR is Concord 112.9. So we want to get that set up on our second frequency. There we go. 112.9. I'm getting a warning here, but let me get this set up here. Come back a little bit on our power. For some reason we've lost our AP. Our speed is dropping, so I'm going to have to reduce our rate of climb here. Of course, trimming the airplane turns off the AP. I can also control it with this. This toggle switch here. A little sensitive. So, 7 miles out. And it's asking for the cowl switch. It looks like so we're still climbing at a good rate. Radios are set. We want to stop at 9,000. So as we get a little bit closer, you will see this needle begin to waver. Maybe you'll see some erratic behavior here. And that is simply an indication that we're getting too close for the aircraft to really do a great job of tracking that. So one thing you can do, since these VORs are closed, we probably don't have to fly outbound. But we can check and see if there's any activity if we switch over. In other words, is it picking it up? The next VOR, that is. So if I flip it, and you can see that the needle definitely has picked it up, so we can just turn in that direction towards that second VOR. So now we are headed for Concord. Again, we can listen to it if we would like. long, short, long, short, long, long, long. So let's it's hard to hear. So we are definitely headed towards that VOR, and the question is, what do we do at the next one? So we've got 32 miles. Our arrow is pointed forward. Turn down the sound a bit. So let's take a look at our next VOR, which is the Lebanon VOR, and the VOR that is going to give us our bearing or our radio for the final approach, and that is a little box here, 113.7. So we're above the cloud deck. So that is all set. So when we reach our next VOR, we can flip that over. The distance between those two, well, it's not given. But we can test for it as we get closer. Left the landing light on. We should probably pull back on our power. Manifold pressure of 18. And we can adjust our mixture as well. I'm watching this here, cylinder head, so I pull back until, until it begins to drop. There we go. So fuel flow 6.6. I'm watching my fuel gauges here. Probably ramp up my power a little bit. Of course, cowl flaps could add a little bit to our speed to close them. And let's see if I can't switch this without causing a problem. There we go. So we're switched over to this fuller tank. By the way, the clouds are courtesy of SkyMax 3.2, I believe. Okay, we are getting closer to our next VOR, just 4 miles out, and I'd like to see if the next VOR, the Lebanon VOR, has been picked up yet. And you can see the needle swing into action, so it has definitely picked it up, and we might as well begin navigating directly to that, smoothing out our dog leg a little bit. So we've got 42 miles. This is a little tool that I created at explaintools.com. There are several tools there. This one will help us determine what our descent should be. So we're at 9,000. And let's say we want our target altitude to be 5,000. I'm sorry, I said 3,900, right? And we'll probably be tracking, let's put in 100 knots, that'll probably be average. And our descent, let's call it 1,000 feet per minute. So we can be 8 miles out. So as we're getting closer to that VOR, we can begin our descent. So back with you in a few minutes as we get closer to the Lebanon VOR. Alright, we are 8 miles out from our VOR, and I'm going to begin our descent here. So dial this down to 39, and I'll show you why in just a second, but I just want to get this going. Very sensitive. There we go. And I'll go ahead and arm that, and nose down, pull back on the power a little bit. Nope, not ready to put the gear down just yet, but I do want to slow down. So let's just review what we're going to do here. We're right about here right now. We're going to cross the VOR. We're going to fly outbound on the 318, fly over the outer marker, then fly outbound on the localizer, do a procedure turn, come back, and shoot our ILS approach. I'm noting 111.9 as our frequency for the localizer, 3,900, and then 35 to intercept our guide slope. So after we make our procedure turn, we'll begin our descent down to 35 and pick up the guide slope. So again, we're right about here. And I'm going to set the heading bug to 318 just so that I have a reference point. And I'm going to go ahead and go full rich on the mixture as we descend. Yep. So just another mile before I flip that over, because the airplane needs about a mile to adjust. I'll flip that over, and when we get the from arrow, the airplane should turn and track outbound on the 318. So the needle will start getting erratic. There we go. The airplane turns, flying outbound on the 318. And we just want to watch our DME just to have some indication of when we need to flip over to our localizer. Speaking of which, let's go ahead and set that. It's 111.9, so we are set there. And we are in the soup. So we're somewhere in here right now, coming off of that VOR, headed towards the outer marker. Now there's a button here that says BC, which means back course. So we can fly, attempt to fly the localizer outbound instead of inbound. So we'll see how that works. If not, I'll flip over to my heading bug. I probably should have that ready to go. It's going to be about 07. The runway is about 187 on the localizer. So I need to be ready. I want the aircraft to turn outbound. Alright, we can go ahead and switch that. Go away. Oh, that's aggravating. So, we are flying outbound. You can see the, I'm going to go ahead and spin that around so it points back towards the airport, 187. So our localizer is to our right. So the airplane's flying a little bit to the east to pick that up. And you'll see the guide slope then go up as we fly out. So we're coming up on 39. Gonna watch our airspeed here. So we'll fly outbound, and then we will make a procedure turn. And that procedure turn will be 52 according to the map. And then back on 232. So I will go ahead and flip this over to just heading. And I'm going to prep this for 35. If I can get it, there we go. So we'll fly outbound for about a minute. So about 100 knots. No gear or flaps yet. So we're out about here at the end of this arrow, and we're going to do a 180 and come back and pick up the localizer. So you can see that we are well below the guide slope, so we will fly level into it. Alright, let's head north again. So now we're still flying outbound parallel to the localizer. And now we can complete our turn 232 to pick up the localizer, and that needle should come around pretty fast. And I'm going to go ahead and begin my descent. So we're coming around to the south. Slow descent to 3,500. We're still well below the localizer, or the guide slope. And here comes our needle very slowly across. I've got the button on APR now. And there's our turn towards the airport. You have to be careful in this terrain. We have some hills we're going to fly in between. Our radar altitude is showing 2,000 feet. So we're coming up on 3,500. So we have captured our localizer, and now it's just a matter of grabbing that guide slope. So we're flying straight and level into it, and we'll see this slowly start to come down, and then hopefully we'll begin our descent. And there goes our vertical speed, a good sign. Go ahead and drop the gear. Speed is coming back a little bit, all that hanging out. Like to approach about 80. About 5 miles out, I'll add 15 degrees of flaps. There's our outer marker, blue dot. So we're over Burger. Watching our speed. So localizer, guide slope, everything is on the money. Make sure our autopilot stays on. And I'm going to go ahead and put in, raise our RPM. You don't see any adjustment here. I did it on my joystick, so the prop has been angled to high RPM. You just want to be ready for any go-around attempt. So I think we're ready for a notch of flaps now. Here's our flap gauge. Down to 15. Increase our power a little bit. Trying to maintain about 80. So mixture rich, prop high. We can put in our cowl flaps, which cool the engine. We have 2 miles visibility. Flying over a divided highway there. Not sure what river this is, but this is the town of Lebanon. Fuel. And we've got landing lights on. Don't need taxi lights yet. Guide slope, localizer. Just keeping an eye peeled for that runway. There it is. 1 notch of flaps. So we have full flaps. And notice the localizer is a little off. So I'm gonna kill the AP and just hand fly it in. Our PAPI shows us a little high. Same scenery as the scenery, or same designer of the scenery here as in Beverly, where we took off from. Yeah, we're low. Take out a couple lights with us. Squeaky brakes. And good, we'll make that first turn off. And we can put up our flaps and strobe light off. Taxi light on, landing light off. And taxi over to the ramp. And there's our FOB. Doesn't look like anybody's home. Little Bonanza F33. So, we made it. Just turn on our overhead here, and cut off our engine there, and turn off our lights. And we'll leave the master on just for a minute. You can, as you know, Coronado has some cool little things here. Open the door. Let our passengers out. Anyway, thanks for flying with me today and experiencing some old-time radio navigation via VFR. See you next time.